I want to talk about the stages of grief and investing and how it relates to what we've been going through as investors and as Americans. Now, you may remember learning about the stages of grief in school. You go through these 5 stages when you're grieving. Number 1, denial, anger, depression, bargaining, and then finally acceptance. Now, denial is where you get into avoidance, we're into confusion. We saw this in a big way back in January and February, where people were saying coronavirus is no big deal. It's not a big problem. It's going to stay in China. It doesn't transmit very well. And experts were saying there's nothing to worry about here, folks. Just move on. And then, of course, we ended up with people dying. We ended up with sicknesses all around America, shutting down businesses, and that's where the anger came in. On one side, you had people saying, you can't shut down my business. You can't tell me to stay home. And on the other side, people saying, no, stay home. It's better for everybody. Let this blow over. And anxiety was the result of that. Back in March, we saw a lot of articles about that, and we're still seeing them. Then you get into depression. People just saying, I feel helpless. I don't know what to do. I feel out of control. This is never going to end. It's going to go on forever. And people start, they're hiring therapists. And depression was a real thing, and it still is a real thing going on right now. Then we end up with bargaining. Now, bargaining isn't necessarily people saying, well, God, if you just take this away, I'll be a good boy or a good girl. Bargaining is a buying of time in many respects. And people are actually sometimes using their time really well. They're getting into groups with each other, chatting online, or maybe they're finding hobbies to get into, or ways to improve themselves, or ways to actually find purpose in their lives. Sometimes it gets into conspiracy theories and things like that, and it can be negative. But bargaining is the next step in the process, which always leads to this, acceptance. We realize, you know what? We've been dealt these cards, and this is the way it's going to be, and we just need to find a way to move on. And this is exactly what companies are doing right now. What's going on in the business world, and this is relating to the stock market, is companies are adapting. They're figuring out new ways to do things. We're seeing new treatments, new vaccines, and herd immunity is a big thing around the world. High-risk populations, well, we may need to actually have them quarantined for a little bit longer to protect them, while other people that can go and work do go out and work. And companies find ways to reduce costs, and maybe they find different ways to do what they've done before, but do it more safely in the new world that they've been handed. And finally, people just adapt to the new normal. It may be that this never does go away, but we adapt to it. Now, what I want you to realize is this. We've been through this many times before. World War I, Great Depression, World War II, Korean War, Cuban Missile Crisis, oil crisis. We've been through banking crisis. We've been through a lot over the past 100 years. We've been through this grieving process and these steps time and time again, and we've always come through it. This is a list of all the problems that we've seen over the last 100 years alone. Now, these stages of grief, realize that it's nothing new. It's a normal process in life. No one can tell you how long it's going to take. It could be really short. It could be long. Realizing that you can't time the market is important, because when people try to time the market, they're taking tremendous risk, and it usually ends badly. Realize this too shall pass. We've been here many times before, but acceptance is always the last step. It always comes. We end up in that stage. And we always have come back bigger, better, and stronger.